North Carolina Coastal Plains Biome by Nicole Jones. Environmental conditions of this biome are that of a temperate deciduous zone. The key features that identify this biome is the temperature ranges from low in the winter and high in the summer. It can reach the mid-30s in the winter and the high 80s in the summer. It can be also very humid in the summers. The precipitation is about 50 to 55 inches annually. Winters are generally wetter than the rest of the year and summers are drier. This area is a deciduous zone, which means that they will see the change of the seasons. The plants will adapt and change to the changing temperature of the 4 different seasons, including losing their leaves in the fall to survive the winter. The water in the ground area ranges in salinity, acidity, and freshness. Most lakes are acidic, and rivers are often brackish due to the sandy soil and clay deposits that impede the drainage. The areas closest to the ocean will experience the high salinity in water. There are many different areas with varying soil types and environmental conditions that end up making a very diverse collection of plant communities. These different habitats include floodplain forests, maritime forests, mesic forests, oak forests, pococyns, tidal swamp forests and wetlands, beach and dune, dry longleaf pine forests, dry coniferous woodlands, early succession habitats, wet pine savannas, and estuarine communities. The forests with the drier soils, like the longleaf pine, dry coniferous, mesic, and oak forests, are found more inland from the coast of North Carolina. Their soils vary based on their location in the coastal plains region. The soils may include loam, sand, coastal sediments, and sand with a clay layer. These areas, as well as peat. These areas will mix and intertwine with each other, as well as create a patchwork of diverse areas across the coastal plains based on the soil permeability, fertility, moistures, and landscape. Early succession habitats are areas where the land was previously cleared for farming. These areas can also be created from fire, disease, or damage from windstorms. The soil in this area is variable but may be fertile, as some areas were once used for farming. The plants are usually made up of shrubs and other scrubby plants. The wet pine savanna, the green swamp, is an example of a wet pine savanna. These areas are low areas where the land usually becomes saturated and covered with water for part of the year. The area also has recurrent fires which clear out the underbrush, creating an open area and high canopy. Beach dunes and maritime forests. These areas are found closest to the ocean. The soil is usually sandy and constantly shifting. The plants in these areas are subject to extreme saline conditions as well as salt spray and high winds. The shifting of the sand and sea levels also creates a shifting of the forest edge for the forest connected to the ocean. Pococyns are areas of peatland where the water is collected in a low area, and sand and clay layers surround the area of peat, which impedes the drainage of the area, so the water collects there. Tidal swamps, forests, salt marshes, wetlands, and floodplain forests are areas where the beaches and land transition. These areas are often exposed to and covered in the area's salt water as the ocean tides rise and fall. The richness of the soil is affected by the runoff from rivers or streams and the permeability of the soil. These areas are often near peatlands where the drainage is poor. Drainage and soil quality can also be affected by clay or bedrock. Example from the dry longleaf pine forest is the longleaf pine tree. Example from the mesic forest is the American beech tree. An interesting attribute of the American beech tree is that its leaves change color in the fall, but it does not necessarily lose them in the winter. This is called marquescence and may be due to the plant retaining its leaves until spring so it can create a better mulch to feed its root system. The example from the salt marsh is the smooth cordgrass. Something interesting about the cordgrass is it is adapted to its salty environment by developing a gland that it uses to secrete the salt that it lives in so that it can use the water for photosynthesis. An example of the conifer with a conifer forest is a slash pine tree. What's interesting about the slash pine tree is that it is, for a pine, it's extremely strong, and this could be an adaptation to the extreme wind and storms it is exposed to on the Atlantic coast. An example from a Pocosin is the loblolly pine. An example from the maritime forest is the Yaupon holly. An example from the wet pine savanna is the Venus flytrap. Something interesting about the Venus flytrap is that it's a plant that is able to move by something called thigmonasty. This is movement that is triggered by the insects touching hair-like projections on the surface of the lobed leaves of the Venus flytrap. Example from the beach and dune area is the Trichostoma nesophyllum, and an interesting attribute of that is that it has stamens that dangle down to dust the back of the pollinators, so that it is sure that the pollen is carried off to another plant. And these are my references. Thank you.